I don't think there's a singular moment in your Dynasty career where you like cross a line from being a beginner to a pro, but I do think that following certain strategies and processes, plus just making smarter decisions year over year, can lead you to becoming more of a pro Dynasty player. And that is what this video is all about. The 5 Dynasty secrets that only the pros know. We'll start with probably the most important secret for really any fantasy league, not just Dynasty, but it is so easily forgotten and can really give you a massive edge over your league mates over time. And that is simply just knowing your league. And this can be as easy and fundamental as just playing to your league's format by understanding scoring nuances, starting lineup requirements, the number of teams in your league. All of that can greatly affect player values league to league. For example, are there people in your league that are huge fans of a certain NFL team or just certain NFL players in general that will then overpay for those guys in trades? I've talked to numerous people on Twitter who either are or know people in their leagues who are massive fans and have bias towards those teams. One guy I know, for example, is in a league with a bunch of Seahawks fans that makes Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba way more valuable to everybody in that league that's a Seahawks fan. Even in my leagues, I'm in Pennsylvania, so I deal with a lot of Steelers fans, a lot of Eagles fans who all love to have Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth. I mean, all of those guys are on their teams, or they want those guys on their team. I even have a friend who's a Dolphins fan, and the easiest way to make him bite on a trade is by dangling a dolphin in his face, any dolphin really, and he's instantly more willing to do a deal with me, even if it's not necessarily the best deal for him. Another example, are there people in your league that overreact to news or overreact to players not doing well that they'll just rage trade someone on the super cheap? One example of this that I saw a lot recently was with T. Higgins a couple years ago. Everybody who had T. Higgins in 2023 hated him for the constant injuries, and then when he did play, he didn't do anything, so you never really felt confident starting him. And I saw a decent number of really bad trades centered around T. Higgins then that now look ridiculous after what he did in 2024. So if there's a guy like that in your league, keep an eye on him in case there's a yard sale from his team. Some examples of guys that you could maybe buy at a discount this year are people like Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Dak Prescott. Dynasty can really become a very what have you done for me lately kind of game to a lot of people, and you should be the person that takes advantage of that. Example number 3, is there someone in your league who really overvalues draft picks or maybe even really undervalues draft picks that you can take advantage of? A perfect example of this is my buddy Russ Fisher at Dynasty Outhouse on Twitter, who is extremely well known in his leagues for not caring at all about his future picks. So much so that as soon as the new set of future firsts and future seconds become available in February, he's already getting offers for his 2027 and now maybe even 2028 picks because people know he just doesn't value them, so they might get a deal on those picks. The same works the other way around, where someone might overvalue future picks and you get a steal on a player by sending away a future pick. And there are so many more trends and tendencies that you can pick up on from your league mates as they show their hands at different points of the year. Some people really don't like to trade, or they might wait to trade at certain points of the year. Some people really overvalue certain positions. Other people really undervalue certain positions. Some people overvalue age. Some people devalue age. There is a lot to learn about the people in your leagues. If you just step back and watch them talk in your league chat, or the deals that they make, or the rookies that they draft, it all might seem like a bunch of little things here and there, but over time, those little things can really add up into big time advantages for you if you know how to use them. So do not underestimate the power of knowing your league mates. The second secret that the pros know is that more is not better when it comes to trading. And by that, I mean that just because you add more pieces in a deal does not make the trade more appealing to the other guy to hit accept. In fact, it can actually make your trade look a lot worse. Let me give you an example. You're trying to buy Lamar Jackson right now to upgrade from CJ Stroud, but you don't want to add another core piece of your team because a trade analyzer says that CJ Stroud plus Nico Collins should equal Lamar Jackson. So instead, you try to break up Nico into more pieces. So you toss in Jaden Reed because the other guy needs a wide receiver. You add in Blake Corum because he also has Kyron Williams, so he probably wants his handcuff. You also add in Hunter Henry because he's your tight end 3, but he could be the other guy's backup or even streamable tight end 1. And for good measure, you also just add in your 2026 third-round pick to really seal the deal. And voila, Keep Trade Cut says that it is a fair deal. He should accept that trade, right? Nope, wrong. See, while you were just adding bland pieces of your roster to satisfy the trade values, you didn't take into account any reason why the other person should accept this deal. Not only is he trading one player for 4 players, meaning that he'd have to cut 3 guys before even hitting accept, but the players you're giving him are meaningless when you're comparing them to Lamar Jackson. You are asking him to trade away his $500,000 Lamborghini that's sitting in his driveway for a Ford Mustang, a Toyota Camry, a Subaru Outback, a moped like the one that Tobey Maguire rode in Spider-Man 2, and just to even it out, $1,000 cash, but in $5 bills. That is what you're doing by offering him this trade. This is the reason why our trade calculator on DynastyLeagueFootball.com has a package adjustment option to mathematically address for these types of deals. On Keep Trade Cut, this trade is technically fair, but on our analyzer, you're still off by about 230 points if you were to add another piece to this deal right now, which is roughly a late 2025 first. I promise you, this deal would look so much better if you instead offered just one really good thing attached to CJ Stroud, like, for example, T. Higgins, than it does with all that extra crap added on top of it. That trade might even still not get accepted, but it is a way better place to lay the groundwork of trade negotiations than the complete other package. And speaking for myself here, I am way more likely to send you a counter offer or at least message you to talk things over if you sent me Stroud and Higgins versus Stroud and a bunch of bench guys because your analyzer said it was fair. So more is not better when it comes to trading. The third secret now is a very simple one, but again is another one that often gets overlooked. Make your life easy on Sunday mornings when you're setting your lineups. I can already tell you, as someone who's only in 4 Dynasty leagues, the worst part of in-season management is setting lineups every freaking week, especially when I'm opening multiple apps on my phone, I'm checking boxes here, I'm moving players around over there. It's just too much for me, and I'm not even in as many leagues as other people, including maybe you watching right now. So that is why I purposely try to make setting lineups as easy as possible for myself. I just recently posted a video on my entire strategy for how to build Dynasty rosters, and reason number 1 for my strategy is because I believe it aligns the closest to optimal player values and annual predictability for player production. But I'm also not afraid to admit that reason number 2 is so I don't have to make many decisions when I set my lineups. I intentionally craft my lineups so I have stud quarterbacks, stud wide receivers, and then a bunch of just mid-level running back starters and handcuffs. Take this team, for example, which did win me a championship this year. I have Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, J.K. Dobbins, Tyron Tracy, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, and Mark Andrews. I don't even need to think about who I'm starting at quarterback every single week. It is Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels unless there's a bye. I also don't need to think about who my wide receiver starters are because it's Lamb, Amon-Ra, and A.J. Brown unless there's a bye. Mark Andrews is my every week set and forget tight end. No real decision there. So all I had to do every week was figure out who my 2 starting running backs were, which most of the time was Josh Jacobs and then somebody else. So really, just one start-sit decision in that entire lineup every single week all year long. And I try to do that in every league I'm in because I just don't have time to sit there and mull over start-sit decisions and then kick myself hours later when I started the wrong guy. That's why I cringe when I see people in leagues where you can start, say, 3 wide receivers and they have Drake London and T. Higgins and Jordan Addison and DJ Moore and Devonta Adams and Calvin Ridley on their roster. Then they ask me which 3 guys they should start, and I don't even know where to begin there. Like, how do you even make a confident decision every week, let alone even the right one? That's why I'm always advising people to trade up at quarterback and wide receiver because it'll add a more elite option to your starting lineup every week, and it also reduces the number of weekly decisions that you need to make. Now, the 4th secret is that rookie draft picks make you popular. The yearly Dynasty calendar is very cyclical. It starts with the NFL and fantasy football season where everybody only cares about points and winning a championship that year. Then we get into the offseason and everybody only cares about rookies and making picks, and points go out the window in favor of raw upside and raw potential. Then the season rolls right back around and people's priorities shift back to points and production for that season before then swinging back to rookie season the following year. It is a very constant, never-changing cycle. So how do you make your team better? Well, the most straightforward answer is to accumulate any and all draft picks, but especially those future firsts that are 1, 2, even 3 years ahead, because they can only gain value as we get closer to those seasons. And there's a reason why draft picks are like currency in Dynasty, because there are really only 2 ways to improve your roster. You can draft rookies that grow into superstars, or you can make trades for those superstars. That's it. And draft picks have the most unique quality in Dynasty that they are the one singular asset in the game that can do both. They give you the option of either drafting a rookie or trading that pick for a player, and that's why they are so valuable. Too often I see teams that are just dead in the water because they undervalued their draft picks and they constantly traded all of them away for players who could score points now, and sometimes it works and they win like a championship, but oftentimes they don't win, and now their team is filled with old guys with no value, young guys with no value, and 0 draft picks. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the worst place to be in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So learn to do the opposite. Be the guy who's acquiring future picks for veterans before their values plummet. Be the guy who cuts bait on a young player who maybe still has potential in some people's eyes, but in reality is far from it. Be the person willing to churn out most of your roster for future draft picks, because you can always turn those picks back into players and points whenever you want, but you can't always turn players back into picks, or valuable picks, I should say. Draft picks make you popular. Everybody wants picks, especially in the spring when rookie fever is at an all-time high for any draft class. If you're the most popular person in your league, then you should have every opportunity to also be the best team in your league. And the final secret that pros know is just simply being patient. This might actually be some of my most repeated advice for people that ask me how can they improve their roster, because a lot of the time the answer is really just to be patient. And that advice can be really hard to hear, and it's even harder to actually follow through on, but it is 100% just as actionable as anything else that I could tell you to do. Dynasty is all about the long game. Building out a true contending roster can take some time, and maintaining that contending roster can take even longer. For 75% of the calendar year, player values don't really move outside of a couple big NFL events in the offseason, which is just free agency and the NFL draft. Outside of those 2 events, nothing's happening in January, February, most of April and May, all of June, most of July, for things to change player values dramatically, unless you get that random injury during a workout or somebody randomly got traded. The only time of year where player values can drastically change quickly is in season from September through December. And even then, it usually takes at least a couple of weeks for players to really gain or really lose a bunch of value, because this is Dynasty. We care about more than just weeks 3, 4, and 5 in any one season. So a couple of really good or really bad games aren't likely to sway values hard in either direction. So when I get people that ask me, hey, should I be looking to sell my 1.07 right now? Or what should I do with Garrett Wilson, because the Jets could look completely different in 2025? Or can I make this team a contender this season? My answer is usually just be patient, especially during this time of year in the offseason when there are so many questions that still need to be answered from the NFL. Coaches need to be hired, free agents need to be signed, rookies need to be evaluated, then drafted. And even after all of that, a lot of your really old veterans on your team can't even be moved for peak value until they start playing games again. There's really no one singular move or player to be bought or traded or draft pick to be made that needs to be done in such immediate fashion in the offseason. Even the players that I think are major buys and sells at current values have a long enough window that you don't need to freak out about making moves in the next 24 to 48 hours, let alone within the next week. If you're watching this in late January when I post it, you still have nearly 2 months before free agency starts and NFL players can be traded, which are the first real value changers for players in the offseason. which means that you have nearly 2 months to make moves using the current values of like 99% of the players right now, because there's nothing happening that would change their values right now. Patience might honestly be the single most important skill to have as a Dynasty manager, and I can almost guarantee you that it is the most lacking skill among Dynasty managers across the board. If you can learn to practice patience in Dynasty, learn to operate at just a slightly slower pace than the rest of your league, you will have an advantage over your league mates, and that will set you up for success down the road.